Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the government's economic toolkit. We're going to explore how modern governments do way more than just the basics, how they actively shape our economic world, from the prices you pay to the job market. All right, let's dive in.
So, let's kick things off with the biggest question of all. We have markets, right? These amazing, complex systems for buying and selling pretty much everything. So, why does the government even need to get involved? Why can't the market just handle it all? And that's really the question that kicks this whole thing off.
So here's our game plan. We're going to start with the most fundamental problem in all of economics. Then we'll see how the government's role has changed over time. And from there, we'll break down the three main jobs it does today: allocation, redistribution, and stabilization. We're going to build this picture step by step.
Okay, first things first. We've got to understand this one core challenge that every single society has to deal with, whether we're talking about ancient Rome or today's global economy. This problem is literally why we have economic systems in the first place.
And it all boils down to this one simple, powerful idea: scarcity. To put it simply, we humans want a lot of stuff. Our wants are pretty much unlimited, but the resources we have to make all that stuff, those are limited. Think about it. You might want a new car, a vacation, and a new laptop, but the money to buy them and the materials to make them are all finite. This tension, this is the heart of economics. It means we have to choose.
So, because of this scarcity, every single society has to answer a few really big questions. What are we actually going to make with our limited stuff? More video games or more hospitals? How are we going to make it? With lots of people or with advanced robots? And once it's made, who gets it? And maybe most importantly, how do we make sure things are better for the next generation? All right, so let's look at how our answer to who gets to decide all this has changed a lot over time. The role we expect the government to play isn't fixed, it's evolved, usually because of some pretty huge historical events.
And what's really interesting is you can see this huge contrast right here. On one side, you've got the classic idea from Adam Smith. He imagined a very minimal government, kind of like a night watchman. Its job was simple: protect the country, run a justice system, and build a few public things like roads. But on the other side, you've got the modern government, which has this way bigger mission: to actively steer the economy so it's efficient, fair, and stable.
This timeline really shows you the turning point. For a long, long time, that minimal government idea was king. But then, the 1930s and the Great Depression happened. This was a global catastrophe that proved that markets, if you just leave them completely alone, can fail in a spectacular way, causing massive unemployment and suffering. That event was a game changer. It completely reset our expectations for what a government should be doing.
So, if the government is now doing all this extra stuff, how do we make sense of it all? What are its main jobs, really? Well, luckily for us, a brilliant economist named Richard Musgrave came up with a super clear and powerful framework to help us understand it. Back in 1959, Musgrave published his classic book, and in it, he laid out this simple three-part structure. He argued that you can basically sort everything a government does for the economy into these three buckets. This idea was so powerful that it became the gold standard, and it's still how economists think about this stuff today. And here they are, the three big ones: allocation, redistribution, and stabilization. You can think of these as the three main tools in the government's economic toolbox. Each one has a totally different purpose, so let's dig into what each of these really means. Okay, but before we get into the weeds, there's one really important thing to notice here. The first two functions, allocation and redistribution, are what we call microeconomic. They're focused on the small scale: individual people, individual companies, individual markets. But that third one, stabilization, that's macroeconomic. It's all about the big picture, managing the health of the entire economy.
So, first up, the allocation function. And you can kind of think of the government here as the economy's gardener. It's stepping in to do a little pruning, a little weeding, just to make sure everything's growing as well as it possibly can.
Basically, this function kicks in when the free market, left to its own devices, just doesn't get it right. Sometimes markets fail to make the right amount of something, or they produce things in a wasteful way. That's when the government steps in to try and fix these market failures. So what does that look like in the real world? Well, it's things like providing public goods, like national defense or a legal system, stuff that we all need, but that a private company couldn't really sell to people one by one. It's also building roads and bridges and setting up the basic rules of the game, like regulations that prevent one company from becoming a giant monopoly.
So if there's one thing you remember about the allocation function, make it this: its goal is efficiency.
It's all about getting rid of waste and making sure the economy is running on all cylinders, so that our total economic pie is as big as it can possibly be.
All right, on to function number 2, redistribution. Now, if allocation is about making the economic pie bigger, redistribution is all about how we slice that pie up. Here, the government acts less like a gardener and more like a fairness officer. Why? Because even a super efficient economy can lead to results that many people just don't think are fair.
And here's the core idea. Just because a market is efficient doesn't automatically mean it's fair. You can have a perfectly efficient system that still results in huge gaps between the rich and the poor. So the redistribution function is how the government steps in to adjust those outcomes to better match what we as a society believe is equitable.
See how the goal totally shifts here? It's not about efficiency anymore, it's about fairness. This is where policies like progressive taxes, where people with higher incomes pay a larger percentage, and social safety nets like unemployment benefits come from. It's all about changing how that pie is divided.
And that brings us to our third and final function, stabilization. Now, the government puts on a different hat. It acts like a pilot for the entire economy, trying to navigate through turbulence and keep the ride as smooth as possible for everyone on board.
This is that big picture macroeconomic role we talked about. The goal is to avoid those wild economic roller coasters, the crazy booms and the painful busts. To do this, the government has 2 main levers it can pull: fiscal policy, which is just its power to tax and spend, and monetary policy, which is usually handled by a central bank to control interest rates.
And by using those tools, the government is trying to steer us toward 3 really important destinations. First, stable economic growth, so our quality of life keeps improving. Second, high levels of employment, so people who want to work can find a job. And third, stable prices, to protect our savings from being eaten away by inflation.
So at the end of the day, it's all about smoothing out those crazy highs and lows of the business cycle. It's about creating a predictable, stable economic environment where families and businesses can plan for the future without having to worry about a sudden crash or runaway prices.
And that leaves us with a final, big question. Musgrave's framework is amazing because it tells us what the government does: allocation, redistribution, and stabilization. But the real, never-ending debate is about how much. How much should the government be doing in each of these areas? There's no easy answer, and finding that perfect balance is one of the biggest challenges for any society.